All right. Good morning and hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening from some of you I know that are coming around the globe. Um, Feel free to say hello and where you're coming from in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and get us started as folks are joining in. This webinar today is provided by IFLA's Environment, Sustainability, and Library section, or otherwise known as ENSULIB. And it's called Help Build Impact Indicators for Library-Led Climate Action. We have hosted over a dozen webinars so far, and we're happy to see some of the same folks joining us again. My name's Beth Filer-Williams. I am a librarian at Oregon State University in the United States, Pacific Northwest. I also have Vivian Bird, who's helping with technology for this webinar, and she's with LA Public Library doing citizen science. I do need to give a quick rundown on our kind of statement of privacy and other information you might need to know. It is being recorded. We post our webinars to YouTube, so you can watch it later, and we'll promote it on our social media as well. Your microphones have been muted, but we'd love questions along the way as they come up. Please put them in our Q&A. We'll have time at the end to be able to answer those. So whenever you think of something, feel free to add it in there. And if you have questions about privacy, you can see the email on the screen that you can email for questions. So today's webinar, I'm happy to share, is both coming from internally from IFLA. Claire McGuire is the manager of policy and advocacy at IFLA, and their partnership with MECCE, I think I'm saying that correctly, Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education Project, includes two Aarons, not just one, but we have two today. Aaron Redman and Aaron Benavote, who are both going to be presenting. All of three will be presenting. They can tell you a lot more about this rather than me spend time telling you about this great project and hopefully sharing some of this dashboard and indicators and a tool that you're going to be able to use. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and allow them to take over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. I think perhaps I will quickly share my screen. Just a moment. So. All right, so thank you, Beth, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Claire McGuire. I'm the Manager of Policy and Advocacy at IFLA headquarters, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk about some work that we're doing that's really dear to my heart, and I think also dear to ENSULIBs and everyone else that's joining here. So I thought I would start by laying a little bit of groundwork of what Action for Climate Empowerment is, how IFLA is involved in this work, and yeah, some of our theory of change around what we're trying to accomplish by doing this work. And then that will be a really good sort of lead into the practical aspect of this project we're talking about today around creating indicators. So just to provide a little bit of background of how IFLA is working in this way, we seek to be the global voice of the library field, representing library interests in as many different areas as possible. So that's sort of looking externally, but also internally, because we hear what is interesting and relevant for library professionals, and then we create space to bring that into larger, the international arena. So part of our work is connecting librarians, enabling professional development, and meeting librarians from around the world, advocating for libraries, and then building professional practice. And this work around climate education, climate communication, climate empowerment has a role across all of these areas of work. This came about really organically from IFLA's work in sustainable development. Over the last years, IFLA has been working within our community around showcasing how librarians are helping to achieve sustainable development, make an impact on development. So that has taken a lot of focus on information for development, advocating for why access to information and knowledge is a critical part of achieving development across the agenda, building a body of evidence and advocating for why librarians are important for successful implementation of this work. And then empowering librarians to deliver on the SDGs, to see themselves as champions of sustainable development and work with other stakeholders in their context. So that has been the work IFLA has been doing now for almost a decade. And coming out of that, we have noticed a lot of interest, a lot of activity in climate action. And this is a bit of a timeline of how we've come about to this work. So IFLA was very active with Climate Heritage Network, so specifically bringing voices from the cultural sector, from heritage, and from different memory institutions into the climate space. This was reflected within our larger community by ENSULIB becoming an official IFLA section, showing the importance, sustainability of this work for IFLA. We really stepped into the international arena in 2022, bringing the first library delegation to the UN Climate Change Conference, COP27 in Egypt. And that was really where the first ideas for this project came from with our partners at the MECCE Project. And then we've become an official partner of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's the largest international sort of space policy where countries are working to address the climate emergency last year. And we are deepening our engagement over the course of last year and looking into this year. So again, we've brought librarians to COP. We've had these conversations in really multidisciplinary arenas, really for the first time, bringing a library perspective to this space. And the area we found when working in the climate action or in the climate policy space where libraries have a really close fit is in Action for Climate Empowerment, ACE. And that is not just a nice to have, it is an article of the UNFCCC convention. So countries are required to take steps to implement ACE in their national context. And here on the screen, you'll see the 6 different pillars, I guess, the 6 different elements of ACE: education, public awareness, training, participation, public access to information, and international cooperation. And I know, speaking to a library audience, I don't need to go into too much detail around the fact that libraries have a role in these areas. Public participation, access to information, lifelong learning and education are all really central to the mission of libraries. And this is sort of the credo from ACE, that everyone must understand and participate in the transition to a low emission, climate resilient world. So every person must have the tools, the equipment, the knowledge, the space to have a part in this transition. And over the last years, IFLA has looked within our own institute, within our own network around how librarians see themselves and their institutions as having a role. We did a big session last year at the World Library and Information Congress where we collected a lot of ideas, and I just put a smattering of them up on the screen of different ways that different types of libraries have a role in this. You know, we have research and academic libraries doing work on open science. We have public libraries doing work on citizen science, and really small community libraries doing libraries of things and sustainability programs and everything in between. So very quickly, I just want to lay the great groundwork here. ACE matters because for libraries because we have a role to play. We can't achieve climate empowerment for all people in society if these lifelong approaches aren't taken. And that's a space where libraries really naturally fit. Over the last years, we've been participating at the international level and noticing there's been gaps in terms of how climate data is managed, how all learners at all ages are reached, language and diversity in the material being produced on climate, and in-country coordination between stakeholders. So this really lays the groundwork for why IFLA is doing this work. We want libraries to be recognized by all stakeholders, by all decision makers as hubs of climate empowerment. And we want the work done in libraries on climate to be sustainably supported. So the goals, I'm going to sort of quickly go through our theory of change as how we see IFLA helping to do this. So our goals are to help library professionals advocate for themselves in this work, to proactively see climate policymakers, including libraries, in their climate empowerment strategies, and again, to be able for libraries to continue to expand their work. We are drawing from a lot of different things to be able to do this. So of course, our volunteers, our network, libraries around the world, our relationships with external partners, and one really key thing we need is evidence and information, which is bringing us to this project. We are working to raise awareness within our network and wider, supporting advocacy, developing relationships, and building up an evidence base. And hopefully that will lead to the outcomes we want to see, where we aren't only telling stories of what libraries are doing, but showing some concrete proof of the role that libraries are having to achieve a wider shared goal. So that is the idea behind this indicator project. And I'm not going to go into the detail. We are lucky to have our partners from the Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education Project to go into that. But the idea, the interest for us, how it fits into this larger approach for our work is to help build up, to help, one, have a process where we can capture all of these different input from libraries and use that data to create an indicator that helps us measure how libraries are having a role. And that's where I will end. I think that sort of gives a little bit of context around why we're doing this work. And I am happy to hand over to my colleagues from MECCE, who will give a little bit more information as to what exactly this platform is, what their work is in this space, and then we'll end with some really practical information of how you can use the platform and how you can get involved. So, Erin, can I hand over to you?
Yes, you can. Thanks so much, Claire. Actually, when you use the word Erin, you're not sure which Erin you're going to get, but you're going to get me to begin, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Erin Redman. Thanks so much for this introduction and for providing some background about the MECCE Project. The MECCE Project has been around for about 4 years. It was initially funded by the Canadian government. It's what is called a partnership grant. So there's a big emphasis on developing partnerships with all kinds of different organizations, agencies, civil society groups, and academics. Currently, we have more than 100 partners. And so IFLA is one of our very important partners here, especially with respect to developing indicators. The work that the MECCE Project is involved is trying to improve the evidence and indicator basis around which all kinds of decision makers and policymakers negotiate or think about how much progress is being made in this area of climate communication and climate education. During the last 3 years, we've been 4 years almost, there are 3 big outcomes or outputs that the project has been involved in producing. One is around global indicators, which I'll speak about in just a moment. But we've also been developing country profiles of climate communication and education, and we have now these profiles for 80 countries from around the world. And another big output has been in supporting innovative case studies at many different levels, local levels, regional levels, innovative work that's going on in the area of climate education and communication. These are proposals that are submitted to the MECCE Project, and the successful proposals receive a certain sum of money, about 10,000 Canadian dollars, to continue the work that they put out or that they proposed in their application. So let me talk a little bit about the global indicator work that I lead in the MECCE Project. As Claire indicated, much of our work is kind of rooted and organized around the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change that was originally ratified in 1992. And in that initial document, there's a paragraph speaking to the issues of climate empowerment, which was kind of enhanced and enlarged in the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accord in 2015. The idea is for us to provide some kind of systematic information about each of those pillars that were mentioned in the Action for Climate Empowerment Initiative. So we tend to look at education, we divide it into two different things: primary, secondary education and higher education. And then we have been trying to develop indicators for each of the other pillars or indicators. The idea is to develop sources of information that are not reliant on country self-reports or information that can be validated. There's other criteria that we've been using, you'll see in just a moment. And this information is meant to not only serve for intergovernmental negotiations, but also to motivate and support the actions and activities of all kinds of civil society groups, including, let's say, libraries. And certainly, this is also meant to provide researchers in this space with a new sets of data that can be used to look at the linkages between all kinds of aspects related to climate education that are emerging from all kinds of interesting research in this area. As we got started in the MECCE Project, we kind of cast a very broad net to try to determine all the different kinds of data sources and data sets that are relevant to this ACE program. We ended up, I think, exploring more than 150 different data sources, and then used a series of criteria, things like, are the data readily available? Do they provide a picture of changes over time? Do we have information for, let's say, more than half the countries in the world? Those were criteria that we used in order to focus or prioritize which data sets we wanted to pursue. And in the end, we've come up with 14 indicators, a suite of 14 indicators that you can see here listed. One of them is cross-cutting, but the others make reference to 5 of the 6 pillars that were mentioned. We have not created indicators for international cooperation in this area, but we are focused on each of the other elements. And you can see here that the indicator around libraries is included under the public access to information, although, as Claire indicated, libraries play a role in many different respects, both in terms of linking to formal education, providing training opportunities, enhancing public awareness around climate, and certainly encouraging people to get involved more actively in the area of climate adaptation and mitigation. It is important to speak to this issue around why we in the MECCE Project feel so strongly about the importance of developing measures or indicators in the area of non-formal or informal education. Much of the policy work and many of the policy decisions have mainly been focused on formal education, to some extent also universities. And I personally am very much aware of all the challenges in trying to develop serious data around lifelong learning, especially adult and youth non-formal education. But these challenges should not, I think, defer us from trying to reach out and develop new and creative sources of information about non-formal education. Non-formal and informal are distinctive in the sense that there's less structure, it tends to be voluntary, it much more speaks to the intrinsic motivation of the learner, the goals are determined by learners, there's very minimal assessment, and although there may be some certificates of completion or even micro-credentials, sometimes related to some of the programs that learners might engage in the non-formal sector, these are very different from the kinds of qualifications that are recognized or that come from completing programs in the formal sector. We do know from all kinds of other data sources that a lot of adults in many parts of the world are engaged in many different kinds of non-formal and informal education, even if it goes relatively unmeasured. Those attempts to measure it certainly indicate that between the ages of, let's say, 25 to 60, a very large and significant proportion of adults are involved in some form of non-formal and informal education. These are some of the main characteristics, that it caters to people of all ages. It does not necessarily apply a continuous learning path, but people move in and out of non-formal or informal or formal programs. There's an enormous diversity of non-formal education. Many of these aspects of non-formal education, literacy programs, farmer field schools, tutoring, scouting, youth organizations, libraries and museums, on-the-job training, many of them can incorporate a focus on climate and sustainability topics. It is also important, and that's one of the reasons why the data compilation is challenging, is that many of these are outside of the government sector. They're non-public providers of these kinds of educational and learning opportunities. Many of them are short-term or low intensity in terms of courses or workshops or seminars, but they do provide a very important additional and alternative complementary aspect of learning in conjunction with, or certainly after the end of a lot of the formal schooling has been completed. And as we've come to learn, and as I'm sure all of you are keenly aware, libraries offer just amazingly interesting, engaging settings for the teaching, learning, discussing of climate and sustainability topics in a wide range of formats, some more structured and many others unstructured. So with that, I'm going to end my part here and turn it over to the other Erin, who will give you some sense of what our website looks like and how you can learn a little bit more about the library indicator that we've been developing.
Great. Thank you very much, Erin. As was mentioned already, one of our main goals is to not just produce this information, but produce it in a way that's useful for all different types of stakeholders, in a way that can help to foster and promote further climate change education and communication. So one of the areas that we've been doing this is by developing a platform here that you can find through the links that were shared. And I just wanted to first take a moment to walk you through a little bit of the platform and how it looks and what you can discover on that. We can talk a little bit about the indicator that we've been working on developing with IFLA, that it's still an ongoing process, as you'll hear a little bit about towards the end. But just to take a moment to walk through, if you go ahead and go to the page in the future, you'll always come to this landing page here, which shows all the different areas in which you can navigate. To discover more about the library indicator in particular, we can go to the indicator view, which you can go here, or to one of the buttons on the side screen. When you go here, you'll have access to finding out information about all 14 of the indicators that we currently have up. We'll be adding more indicators throughout this year, a couple hopefully in time in the next month, and then as well a new suite of some different indicators for the climate conference towards the end of the year as well, in addition to refreshing and improving the indicators we have. At this drop-down menu here, you'll be able to find a list of all the current indicators which are up online. As Erin Benevot mentioned, currently the library climate activities by libraries is under the ACE element of public access to information, which you can find categorized here. So if you select the climate activities by libraries, you get brought to the page which shows all of the information that we have about this indicator. So a couple of things I just wanted to mention is one thing to be aware of is when you're exploring this platform, just make sure that the year is selected here, as we have data from all different types of years, and you just want to make sure that you're looking at a current year. So you may need to select something there. As you can see, currently for this indicator, we have data from 52 countries. And so this indicator is being produced by a survey that we are worked on with IFLA and is being distributed to library associations and individual libraries around the world. And we welcome and invite everybody to participate in that, which is asking both the associations and the individual libraries about the types of activities that they may be doing, from programs to resources that they're sharing to partnerships that they might be making related to climate change and environment and sustainability. And using the data from that, we aggregate that data at the country level. As Aaron mentioned, we're working to try to understand what is happening at the country level. And so we are aggregating the individual responses from the different libraries and library associations to the country level. And when we have sufficient responses from a country that we believe gives the information we have, gives an indication or a measure of how well or to the extent that libraries and library associations are implementing climate activities in their country, we create an index score based on their responses and display that information here. If you're interested in more details about the methods for each of our indicators, we do have a link over here where you can follow to find out more about the methods, the current methods for each of the indicators. In order to make it a little bit easier to understand the meaning of the indicators, we've put all 14 indicators into 5 levels, meaning 1 being the sort of least well developed in terms of climate communication education, and 5 being the highest level category grouping that we have. And this way, because each of the indicators often has different data sources and different meaning, it allows you to understand and interpret and compare between different types of indicators. On this map below, you can look at how the different countries are doing, both in terms of the value. So if we hover over, for example, Canada, we can see that the indicator value of Canada is 38.9. So on this, we're using a scale from 0 to 100. But to sort of cross-interpretate that, we can see that this has been assigned an indicator level of 2. One other additional thing that you can do on this page is kind of neat, is that you can look at how the countries here individually plotted by dots compare to different, what we call country characteristics. So in this case, it's comparing the extent of activities with the greenhouse gases emitted per person by that country. And you can select different options here. For example, if you wanted to look at it by the amount of money, we can see sort of a general relationship here, for example, between countries with more income per capita and more activities being taken on by the libraries. Though obviously you have a lot of different cases of countries doing extensive activities with the libraries, despite not being at necessarily the same income level. So this is the main page, and you can explore this for all of our indicators. But I wanted to also, while I have you here, show you a couple of the other features that we have on our platform that I think you may find interesting as well, and I think are a good way to learn a little bit more about what's happening with climate education and communication. So if we go back to our homepage, there's a couple other features that I wanted to show. One is that, as I mentioned, one interesting thing is to compare the indicators that we have with other information. So on the relationships view, we can look, for example, at how the library indicator compares to other of the indicators that we have. So right now, I just put the climate activities by libraries on the x-axis, and we can compare that to some of the other indicators that we have. For example, if we put on the y-axis this is the one I was looking for, perceived in exposure to information on climate change. We can see perhaps a weak relationship, and we can see some of the different countries that are doing well on both the activities by libraries and exposure to information. We could look at the relationship, for example, to what's happening in the higher education sector. That's not a good one. And see here, for example, that we see perhaps some relationship between the amount of climate change information and curriculum. So there's a lot of different things that you could explore in here depending on your interests. And then there's other things as well, but the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to actually is two more things. The next is I would encourage you to look for a country profile if about a countries either that you live in or work in or are interested in. There's a lot of great information. We have experts who are working in this who go on the profiles and learn something new. I think that you almost always can find out something new that's happening. It's a great way to learn about climate change activities. We also have what we call a country view for our indicator page as well. And this allows you to see all the things that we know from an indicator perspective about a particular country. So here we can find out how well a country does on all the indicators that we have, the 14 that we have. It enables you to see a little bit about information about the country just in terms of its statistics. And then the final thing, which I will close with in terms of talking about this, is that we've also been collecting organizations, what we're calling climate communication education organizations. In other words, civil society organizations that are working in climate change education or communication in a country. And we've collected now over 3,000 different organizations from around the world whose information we've collected and verified and put into a database. And so you can see the organizations here for a particular country. But the other feature, if that is of something of interest, is if you go to the organizations tab, you can then explore all the organizations that we have in our database, and it's being updated. There's some more that we need to load up. And if you click on them, you can find out a little bit of information, go to their website and their Twitter and Facebook page if they have them, and discover more about organizations working in countries or locations where you're yourself are active or working in as well. So that is an exciting resource to get connected and build those connections with others. So I think that covers the main part here. In closing, then I just want to bring us back to the presentation, which we had, though it didn't save on the right slide. There we go. And so just to close out here is the message that we have here in general is we have this really big need for indicators, and we need indicators as was mentioned because indicators help us to understand what's happening. They help us to know which things are working or which countries or programs are being successful. And they also give us additional motivation and enable us to hold our organizations and our governments accountable for the actions that they're promising to do. I think we all can agree that libraries play a particularly critical role in contributing to climate change education and action. But one of the things that's a struggle to sort of forefront and bring that role to the front is sort of a lack of visibility of the work that libraries are doing. And so one of the goals that we have of this survey is not just to construct an indicator for the sake of an indicator, but is to make more visible and explicit the work that libraries are doing and library associations are doing around the world. So we're looking to bring to the forefront the work that you all and your colleagues are doing and really sort of feature that and bring attention and credit to libraries and the work that they're doing. And so that for us is one of the goals of the indicator, and we put that up, as you can see, on the platform, and we'll be updating and improving that indicator in addition to our other indicators. And I think one of the other things about this survey, as Clara will, I think, talk about a little bit more as well, but just that, there is a lot already. We've discovered really a lot of exciting activities and interesting things that are going on at libraries via the survey. And we also think this source of information and participation in this will enable a lot of sharing as well globally among libraries and associations in terms of what is going on. So just want to say on our part, yeah, we welcome and are excited to get your participation in this and your contribution. So thank you. Back to that.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. If I think I just want to second that that importance, both for talking to policymakers or talking even within our own institutions, of saying, look, we can see people feel that they have more access to climate information in countries that have more climate activities in libraries, and we aren't just saying that, we can show that. So I think there's a real utility in doing this sort of project, but also being able to hear from all of you is really important. So I would really encourage you to look at that platform and see what you can learn there. But IFLA, from our own advocacy and policy work, we will also be drawing heavily on that in our participation in going forward. It's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, thank you all so much for this. I'm wondering if there's any questions from anyone out there, or if anyone's been able to use the platform. I don't see any in the Q&A yet, but I find it fascinating. I was curious, are there certain areas or countries around the globe or that we're trying to seek more examples and work for indicators that you could share?
I don't know if you wanted to go on that, Aaron, or not, but I think in terms of sort of geographic coverage, I think you know, that one of the things that I think is really important about this survey as opposed to other data sources is that we're starting from a premise of collecting information from everybody, and it was something intended to be for everybody. And a lot of the data that's already out there, you know, really is a bit more focused on a region, or maybe comes from some existing organization that doesn't have the sort of global perspective. You know, that said, I think that, you know, it is more, there's certainly, you know, regions of the world that are more challenging to reach, that maybe aren't as plugged in to some of the global networks or as plugged into the International Library Association. So I would definitely, and as we mentioned, like, this is an opportunity for that voice to be heard. And so for us, it's really a high priority to try to better represent, you know, countries in the global South, countries from regions that have typically been underrepresented. You know, when we speak in the climate space, you know, it's a particular concern and importance that we make visible those countries and regions that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and perhaps have had the least, you know, responsibility for emissions historically. And so, you know, that's something that we prioritize in our outreach efforts as well. And so I definitely encourage, you know, any responses from that. So
I would add a very brief point here, and that is that quite a few of the indicators that we have and that some other platforms have been making use of primarily stem from official government data, right? And you know, governments are under enormous pressure to provide, you know, kind of systematic information to a whole gamut of different surveys. Many countries in the world don't have either the resources or the capacities really to provide, you know, that kind of information. On the other hand, in this area, it's so important to also give visibility to all the work that's going on in civil society outside of government, you know, whether it be, you know, all the different civil society organizations, and certainly libraries and museums that are locations where climate empowerment and activity and awareness raising are going on. So we, in some ways, you know, a lot of these organizations are more than happy to support, you know, providing information about their work, They're not as, I'm not sure I want to use the word jaded, but they certainly aren't as exhausted from requests for data that you might have, let's say, governments have. And so we're more than delighted to, work together, with IFLA on the development of this indicator. We think it's a great way to, shine a light of all the important work that's going on in libraries through the survey. In many countries that, as Erin mentioned, are not really on the radar screen of some of the high-level discussions that go on.
Yeah, and talking about the informal learning, I bet that's it sounds a lot of challenges to try to find that. It's happening, but sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
It's hard to find that information, even though it's happening out there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the education researchers that have tried to capture informal learning, and there's quite an interesting history of this, primarily in Canada and some other researchers, you have to almost do face-to-face interviews with individuals and ask them to almost reconstruct. So over the course of the last week or the last 2 weeks, what kind of learning opportunities or learning engagement have you, been involved in? And a lot of times they're not the people that are involved in this kind of, qualitative interview have a hard time remembering or being conscious of all the different spaces. They may have gone to a hardware store and learned something about, do it yourself, like how to fix their, whatever, their closet or something like that. Lots of learning that goes on. And so you have to probe in a way that kind of forces people. On the other hand, when you think about places, locations that are places where all kinds of learning take place, it's a different kind of set of measurement challenges, because libraries and all kinds of museums keep records of these things and have stakeholders that they also must provide information to, and boards of governors and all kinds of other different things. So there's an internal accounting and auditing of activities, and partly they can draw upon this when asked to, let's say, through surveys and other mechanisms about the work that they do.
Yeah, I would just respond as well to Karen's question in the chat there. Just to say that the library map of the world was actually really useful when we were designing and planning the survey, and to give us a sense of the countries that we were targeting, and has also helped us to contextualize the responses. So one of the key questions when we're doing something like collecting data on this to create an indicator is, are the results that we're getting representative of the libraries in this case, that we're working with? And so the world map, has helped us to, give us a sense of what, that context is in the countries where we've gotten responses, and whether, to the best of our knowledge, we think that the responses that we've gotten are likely to be representative of the activities of the libraries in the country. So the information itself isn't feeding in directly, but it's been something that we've used to understand the context of our survey responses as well.
Yes, and I think internally we are, the library map isn't really going into this level of information on specific areas of action, but we're really keen to cross-reference as well within IFLA. So, and we worked with our team here that facilitates the library map to talk about what data we're collecting through the survey, and I think it will give us a much more realistic picture of how climate action is happening and where in libraries. So if there's no more questions, maybe I can talk about what the action is that we need help on. So we've put the link in the chat, but you can also find it in the resources tab. You'll find a one-pager that you can download that goes into detail in relatively straightforward terms, because I know this can get a little academic and heavy, but it talks about what an indicator is and how we can use it and why it's important. So I would encourage you to download that one pager and share. So that's the first thing that you can do is talk about this project. Because we need to strengthen the library indicators. And we strengthen the indicator by having more representation through the survey. So there are two different surveys. There's a survey for libraries, institutions, and there's a survey for associations. Through that link, you can access both of them. But I encourage you to, let me put it on my screen as well. The link is here. You will see. I muted myself, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So firstly, I would encourage you, if you're coming from an individual institution, to have a look at the library survey, because all the different input we can get from as many different libraries is great, is helpful. But secondly, what would be really, really important and really helpful is to reach out to the library associations in your country. Reach out to the associations you're part of, talk to them about this project, share that one pager, and share the association survey, because associations are representing larger bodies, and that really helps us build up the representation in the data. So we would really encourage you again to share that link within your networks. If you are working with other librarians who are interested in this topic, all of the input is really important, and all of the input is really seen. You know, we have a clear output for participating in this survey. We are including the work that you're doing and helping us shape this picture of library impact, and hopefully bring a little bit more power, a little bit more of a database, evidence base to the conversations that we're having. And also, I hope that's useful for you as well. So again, in the resources tab, you will find the one pager. In the chat, you'll find the link to more information to the two surveys. They're available in English, Spanish, French, Arabic, and Chinese. I recognize we've done this in English, but the survey itself is available in hopefully a language that will help facilitate your participation. And IFLA is always there for answers if you have questions. And one important thing with the survey, you don't have to have an answer to everything, because they do cover a lot of different aspects of what libraries might do in terms of climate action. And if you feel, I mean, we do some of this, but maybe not all of it, you're still more than welcome to submit the information that you have on what you do. So don't let that stop you. And yeah, we really hope that this can be a powerful tool for the library field to help us all advance the work that we're doing in support of climate education and communication. So I think if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to answer. But I think the call to action is clear, hopefully, and we'd really love for you all to be involved. And thank you to ENSULIB for giving us the opportunity to speak about this project and help bring it to your network as well.
Maybe there's one additional thing that I'd just like to take a moment to say. If you recall, when I presented some of the information about the MECCE project, I mentioned the 80 country profiles that we've created. And these are also a wonderful source of information about things that are going on around climate education and communication in particular countries. It's a much deeper description about all the kinds of activities based on all kinds of websites, often prepared by people who are native speakers or citizens of those countries. And eventually, I would imagine as we update those profiles, we'll be able to integrate information from the library surveys into those national, those country profiles. And those country profiles have been downloaded based on the information I have, more than 10,000, 20,000 times, quite extensively being used. So another way for us to shine a light on what the role that libraries are playing in particular countries will be to integrate findings from the surveys, either by the association or by individual libraries, into our national, these country profiles of climate communication education. I just thought that there's another kind of indirect way that we can make use of the participation that people would have through the surveys.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all again for being here, and those listening now or listening later to the recording. You've heard the call to action. There's different avenues to go, but the survey, we need your help to make this better so this tool is better for everyone. I've done the survey myself. Like Claire said, you don't have to fill out everything, but please do it, pass it on, and yeah, check out this fabulous tool that we have. So again, thank you all, and have a great rest of your day or evening.
Sorry, I have one question.
Ooh, good, go for it.
I just popped it in the chat. So my question is, for the survey, is it for any librarians from, for example, if they're all from same branch library, some of them wanted to answer it, would that be okay? Or you're looking more for like input from the administrative level of a library?
Yeah, I think, you know, we would like to have maybe one cohesive answer from an institution. It doesn't necessarily have to be the administrator, because maybe somebody else within the institution would be more, you know, well suited to do that. We do collect the name of the libraries. So if we have multiple from the same, I guess it could be all taken into account, or sort of the median of those answers put together. But I think it would be, I think the best way to approach it would be to talk about it within the department, to talk about it within the library, regarding who might be the most appropriate, or who might be the most informed to respond, and then going about it that way. But it's a bit context specific. So I think what makes sense within the institution to have one sort of representative response is the best way forward.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. And on that note, I'll put the information about where we'll be posting the recording. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to take the survey. And if not, come back and watch the recording again later to learn more. And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Erin, and Claire, and Vivian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this opportunity. Bye.
Bye.